In the year 1888, a passenger vessel turns into Ellis Island, carrying with it nearly 900 European immigrants, eagerly awaiting their new lives on the American industrial frontier. Among the crowd of soon-to-be naturalized citizens is me, Giancarlo Esposito, a young man fleeing his growingly overpopulated and economically depressed corner of the world in southern Italy. Little did I know I would face very similar obstacles to the West. With very little money and only a basic understanding of the English language, I begin my trek to find work by boarding a train to Illinois. When I arrive, I can't help but notice the awful smell and poor hygiene all around me. Without a sewage system, the streets of Chicago are clotted with filth and waste from both horses and people. The first thing I do after arriving at the Chicago Union Station is visit the desk of immigration to try and gather the information I need to find shelter and work. I learn the only option I can afford is a small studio apartment with 4 other families in a large, crowded building called a tenement house. I take a job in a meatpacking factory, seeing that the pay is, well, not very much at all, enough to keep up with rent at the tenement house. At the meatpacking factory, I work long hours doing strenuous physical labor. Some of my coworkers become gravely injured while working dangerous machinery, losing arms, legs, and on occasion their lives entirely. I'm closest with another immigrant who arrived here from Russia. He has a daughter who lives in an orphanage in the city because he could not provide for her. Regardless, I push on, hoping to slowly build the wealth and status promised to me by the grand idea of the American dream. It's been half a year and I'm beginning to lose faith in the meritocracy that the politicians and aristocrats on the radio tell me I'm living in. A few co-workers convinced me to join a factory workers union in an effort to gain some leverage against my superiors. Eventually, we organize a labor strike against the factory, and I'm given enough compensation to keep me healthy until we get what we need. A good few of us get laid off, but eventually the factory manager relents, and we make a little bit of progress in getting shorter work hours and a little bit of a better wage. With the amount of labor and possibility of injury, I see the benefits of being a farmer, who had both more freedom and more fresh air.
My entire life since I could remember, my father taught me how to live off the land for myself. I've worked on this farm since the day I could walk. This means that I have very little formal education to the point where I cannot consider myself literate. Every morning I wake up before sunrise and feed my cows and tend to my crops all day. On the off chance I'm not working the land, I'm helping my wife produce the goods to keep our household running since we do not have access to a community of specialized artisans. When I'm not doing any of that, I spend time with my children, which is something I don't get to do very often. I wish I was able to provide for my family more, but I sell all of my beef to Jeffrey Bezos for half the price I used to. All of my neighbors sold their farms to the bank to move into the city. I've seen my personal profits dwindle significantly as a result. It is the consequence of America's new desperate desire to consolidate businesses and their production, especially owners like Bezos. It is also the result of heavy immigration occurring in the cities, causing a need for more jobs, more products, and therefore a higher reliance on big ranches than small sustenance farms like myself. As a result, I dislike these newcomers because we're all desperate, but they're making it worse for the desperate people who were here first. On top of that, a major drought has devastated the crop success in the area, causing several neighbors of mine to move either south or further west. We sadly don't have the resources to do so. My wife and I have 3 children, and feeding them is getting more and more difficult every day. We live in the Midwest. My family initially acquired this land under the Homestead Act like many of our neighbors. Even though getting ownership of the land was quite cheap and easy, our living space was not as easy to transpire. Because of the lack of resources, the house I grew up in was much less sound than it is now. Ever since lumber has been crossing the plains through the increasing use of railroads, we've been able to upgrade the materials the house is constructed of to make it both more comfortable and durable. Despite that, our conditions are better than the urban poor in terms of spacing. They're not much better in terms of quality. I recently joined a local farmers alliance to try and take action over the situation. I'm afraid that soon I'll have to follow my neighbors, sell my parents' farm, live in one of those 100-person apartment buildings. I would ask for sympathy, but I do not think Bezos is capable of that based on his stringy personal properties and a lack of compassion towards the little guy.
When the war ended, I decided to enter into the meatpacking industry. I had a considerable sum of money from building sluices in the mining rivers during the gold rush. I had decided to purchase some cow farms out on the frontier in hopes of finding a new business venture. This proved to be a troublesome endeavor because meat does not stay fresh for long periods of time. It was not until the invention of the refrigerated car when my business started to flourish. Upon its invention, I started to heavily invest in these new rail cars. I even created a research and development team to create a more efficient way of packing and shipping. All was well until the year 1888. That year, there were rumblings from unsatisfied workers about their labor conditions. They wanted to form a labor union to ask for better wages and fewer hours. They complained that their working conditions were unsafe and that they did not have enough to survive. At one point, they went on strike because their demands were not met. I eventually gave in to them, a slight raise, in order to keep my business running. It's their fault they did not see the opportunities given to them so that they could prosper. This is due to the fact that they are too weak and unable to accumulate wealth. It is up to me to help these poor people survive.
For a long time, I lived a normal life. However, roughly 15 years ago, my spouse had passed away due to disease. It is likely that he had contracted it while visiting his family, who had been living in a tenement after their business had been bought out by a large corporation. For a short period, I struggled with grief and finances until I crossed paths with a clergy member doing charity work near a cemetery. The rest is history. I decided to devote my life to Protestant Christianity because of how dedicated its followers were to helping those in need. My college education has allowed me to help people in ways I would have never imagined. In recent years, I have been spending almost all hours of the day at the Hull House, a settlement house in Chicago. It is a community center designed to alleviate some of the hardships the urban poor faces by providing various services. It is hard because of the continuous increasing in demands for services, and we do not have the resources to fulfill them. We desperately need the government's assistance, yet we remain unrecognized. The ways in which I contribute at the Hull House include but are not limited to teaching English classes to immigrants on weeknights, teaching Sunday school after service, and researching new and more efficient ways to practice charity. Ultimately, I would like to see every member of society uplifted so that there are no obstacles that stand in the way of anyone trying to receive or give help. I am privileged enough to live comfortably with all of my needs met and then some. However, when I see people like the factory workers wasting away to fill someone else's corrupt pockets, I am filled with the desire to achieve a better future. On occasion, I cross paths with Sarah, a young orphan girl. I understand her reasons for absence at Sunday school, but when I am able to educate her about the ways of God, I feel content.
Hi, my name is Sarah Braun. Even though I'm considered an orphan, I know that I have one living parent. He works at one of the meat packing plants in the area. I have never known him, however, one of the downsides of long hours and little pay. I know I am here because it was the only way he could ensure my safety. I was born in Chicago, though my parents immigrated here from Croatia. It made it hard for my parents to find success because of American nativist views held by the people who they most related to. I have come across people like this as I walk between the orphanage and the settlement house. They simply mistrust unfamiliar cultures and religions, as well as considering immigrant families like mine a threat to their livelihood. After my mom died of disease, my dad got hired at the plant and dropped me off here. At least this is what I am told. I personally struggle with my identity as a Jewish girl surrounded by Christian traditions. I live in a Protestant orphanage and I have to attend Sunday school at the local settlement house. I am taught by Miss Anthropy, and I often hear her and the other workers at the settlement house discussing political issues, especially concerning the government's lack of attention towards the poor despite the growing numbers. Even though I do not have any opinions, overhearing those things helps me understand the workings of the world outside of the settlement house and the orphanage where I spend all of my time. When I am not at the settlement house, I am with my friends from the orphanage. The house does not have much to offer us since they are overwhelmed by the number of people they need to attend to based on their many services. Other than occasional Sunday school, we would possibly go there for a yearly checkup, or if we were seriously ill. That is very common for children in the orphanage. We live in extremely close quarters. That often leads to diseases being spread rapidly. It also doesn't help that we do not have the best living conditions. The only cleaning is done by us when we are not learning. The orphanage is grungy and underfinanced, since it is run by a religious organization and not a priority of the city government. I spend most of my time at the orphanage, either learning, cleaning, or playing with my friends. I spend most of the mornings cleaning, while my afternoon is often taken up by schooling. I know my schooling will end in a couple of years, as I am qualified to join the workforce in about 3 years. The average age to start work for poorer kids is 12. For our free time, which we do not have much of, we don't have much space or resources, so we often just make the best of what we have. It is never a dull moment when one is surrounded by almost 100 girls constantly.